Section 68 of the Expedition of Humphry Clinker. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Martin Geeson. The Expedition of Humphry Clinker by Tobias Smollett. Section 68. To Sir WATKIN PHILLIPS, Baronet, of Jesus College, Oxford. Dear Wat, adventures begin to thicken as we advance to the southward. Lismahago has now professed himself the admirer of our aunt, and carries on his addresses under the sanction of her brother's approbation, so that we shall certainly have a wedding by Christmas. I should be glad you was present at the nuptials, to help me throw the stocking and perform other ceremonies peculiar to that occasion. I am sure it will be productive of some diversion, and truly it would be worth your while to come across the country on purpose to see two such original figures in bed together, with their laced nightcaps, he the emblem of good cheer, and she the picture of good nature. All this agreeable prospect was clouded, and had well nigh vanished entirely, in consequence of a late misunderstanding between the future brothers-in-law, which, however, is now happily removed. A few days ago, my uncle and I, going to visit a relation, met with Lord Oxmington at his house, who asked us to dine with him next day, and we accepted the invitation. Accordingly, leaving our women under the care of Captain Lismahago, at the inn where we had lodged the preceding night, in a little town about a mile from his lordship's dwelling, we went at the hour appointed, and had a fashionable meal served up with much ostentation to a company of about a dozen persons, none of whom he had ever seen before. His lordship is much more remarkable for his pride and caprice than for his hospitality and understanding, and indeed it appeared that he considered his guests merely as objects to shine upon, so as to reflect the lustre of his own magnificence. There was much state, but no courtesy, and a great deal of compliment without any conversation. Before the dessert was removed, our noble entertainer proposed 3 general toasts, then, calling for a glass of wine, and bowing all round, wished us a good afternoon. This was the signal for the company to break up, and they obeyed it immediately, all except our squire, who was greatly shocked at the manner of this dismission. He changed countenance, bit his lip in silence, but still kept his seat, so that his lordship found himself obliged to give us another hint, by saying he should be glad to see us another time. "There is no time like the present," cried Mr Bramble. "Your lordship has not yet drank a bumper to the best in Christendom." "I'll drink no more bumpers to-day," answered our landlord, "and I'm sorry to see you have drank too many. Order the gentleman's carriage to the gate." So saying, he rose and retired abruptly, our squire starting up at the same time, laying his hand upon his sword, and eyeing him with a most ferocious aspect. The master having vanished in this manner, our uncle bade one of the servants to see what was to pay, and the fellow answering, "This is no inn." "I cry you mercy," cried the other, "I perceive it is not. If it were, the landlord would be more civil. There's a guinea, however, take it, and tell your lord, that I shall not leave the country till I have had the opportunity to thank him in person for his politeness and hospitality." We then walked downstairs through a double range of lacqueys, and getting into the chaise proceeded homewards. Perceiving the squire much ruffled, I ventured to disapprove of his resentment, observing that as Lord Oxmington was well known to have his brain very ill timbered, a sensible man should rather laugh than be angry at his ridiculous want of breeding. Mr Bramble took umbrage at my presuming to be wiser than he upon this occasion, and told me that as he had always thought for himself in every occurrence in life, he would still use the same privilege, with my good leave. When we returned to our inn, he closeted Lismahago, and having explained his grievance, desired that gentleman to go and demand satisfaction of Lord Oxmington in his name. The lieutenant charged himself with this commission, and immediately set out a horseback for his lordship's house, attended at his own request by my man Archie M'Alpin, who had been used to military service. And truly, if M'Alpin had been mounted upon an ass, this couple might have passed for the Knight of La Mancha and his squire Panza. It was not till after some demur that Lismahago obtained a private audience, at which he formally defied his lordship to single combat in the name of Mr Bramble, and desired him to appoint the time and place. Lord Oxmington was so confounded at this unexpected message that he could not for some time make any articulate reply, but stood staring at the lieutenant with manifest marks of perturbation. At length, ringing a bell with great vehemence, he exclaimed, "What! A commoner send a challenge to a peer of the realm? Privilege, privilege! Here's a person brings me a challenge from the Welshman that dined at my table. An impudent fellow! My wine is not yet out of his head." The whole house was immediately in commotion. M'Alpin made a soldierly retreat with 2 horses, but the captain was suddenly surrounded and disarmed by the footman, whom a French valet de chambre headed in this exploit. His sword was passed through a close stool, and his person through the horse pond. In this plight he returned to the inn half mad with his disgrace. So violent was the rage of his indignation that he mistook its object. He wanted to quarrel with Mr Bramble. He said he had been dishonoured on his account, and he looked for reparation at his hands. My uncle's back was up in a moment, and he desired him to explain his pretensions. "Either compel Lord Oxmington to give me satisfaction," cried he, "or give it me in your own person." "The latter part of the alternative is the most easy and expeditious," replied the squire, starting up. "If you are disposed for a walk, I'll attend you this moment." Here they were interrupted by Mrs Tabby, who had overheard all that passed. She now burst into the room, and running betwixt them in great agitation, "Is this your regard for me," said she to the lieutenant, "to seek the life of my brother?" Lismahago, who seemed to grow cool as my uncle grew hot, assured her he had a very great respect for Mr Bramble, but he had still more for his own honour, which had suffered pollution. But if that could be once purified, he should have no further cause of dissatisfaction. The squire said he should have thought it incumbent upon him to vindicate the lieutenant's honour, but as he had now carved for himself, he might swallow and digest it as well as he could. In a word, what betwixt the mediation of Mrs Tabitha, the recollection of the captain, who perceived he had gone too far, and the remonstrances of your humble servant, who joined them at this juncture, those 2 originals were perfectly reconciled. and then we proceeded to deliberate upon the means of taking vengeance for the insults they had received from the petulant peer. For, until that aim should be accomplished, Mr. Bramble swore with great emphasis that he would not leave the inn where we now lodged, even if he should pass his Christmas on the spot. In consequence of our deliberations, we next day in the forenoon proceeded in a body to his lordship's house, all of us, with our servants, including the coachman, mounted a horseback, with our pistols loaded and ready primed. Thus prepared for action, we paraded solemnly and slowly before his lordship's gate, which we passed 3 times in such a manner that he could not but see us and suspect the cause of our appearance. After dinner we returned, and performed the same cavalcade, which was again repeated the following morning, but we had no occasion to persist in these manoeuvres. About noon we were visited by the gentleman at whose house we had first seen Lord Oxmington. He now came to make apologies in the name of his lordship, who declared he had no intention to give offence to my uncle in practising what had always been the custom of his house, and that as for the indignities which had been put upon the officer, they were offered without his lordship's knowledge, at the instigation of his valet de chambre. "If that be the case," said my uncle in a peremptory tone, "I shall be contented with Lord Oxmington's personal excuses, and I hope my friend will be satisfied with his lordship's turning that insolent rascal out of his service." "Sir," cried Lismahago, "I must insist upon taking personal vengeance for the personal injuries I have sustained." After some debate, the affair was adjusted in this manner. His lordship, meeting us at our friend's house, declared he was sorry for what had happened, and that he had no intention to give umbrage. The valet de chambre asked pardon of the lieutenant upon his knees, when Lismahago, to the astonishment of all present, gave him a violent kick on the face, which laid him on his back, exclaiming in a furious tone, "Oui, je te pardonne, Jean Foutre." Such was the fortunate issue of this perilous adventure, which threatened abundance of vexation to our family, for the squire is one of those who will sacrifice both life and fortune rather than leave what they conceive to be the least speck or blemish upon their honour and reputation. His lordship had no sooner pronounced his apology, with a very bad grace, than he went away in some disorder, and I dare say he will never invite another Welshman to his table. We forthwith quitted the field of this achievement, in order to prosecute our journey, but we follow no determinate course. We make small deviations to see the remarkable towns, villas, and curiosities on each side of our route, so that we advance by slow steps towards the borders of Monmouthshire. But in the midst of these irregular motions, there is no aberration nor eccentricity in that affection with which I am, dear Wat, yours always, J. Melford. September 28th. End of Section 68.